Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Balanced Business Coach. My name is Tony Robinson. I'm a life coach for leaders and a burnout prevention specialist. I help individuals and teams create more balance within their personal and professional lives so that they can make a bigger and better impact on the places that they serve. Today, I want to talk to you about maybe a little bit of a sensitive subject. I'm not going to get into my views or my beliefs, but I do want to talk about burnout in this political climate that we are in. We are going into an election very, very soon within the next couple of months. And that means that tension is high, especially in places when you have a melting pot of different personalities, different backgrounds, different cultures. And it's really important that you protect yourself at all costs in order to not burn out from feeling or being influenced by any negativity, any beliefs that don't align with yours in the workplace. So I want to just address that number one, where you work matters. The way that you're going to approach this boundary or this protective shield around you that you have in order to stay sane and balanced and positive during this time is dependent upon where you work. If you work for a government agency or if you work for the military, if you work in a place that requires you to a level to be involved in politics or be supportive of a particular side, then your approach for this is going to be very different from someone who works in an environment where politics are completely off limits. You don't talk about them. It's very professional. There is no talk of any political conversation, views, topics. So, number one, going into this, just know that the way that you handle this could be different depending on where you work. And then, number two, I want you to know that it's very important to address that your boundaries and your values as an individual matter. Your workplace can dictate how they, as an organization, believe and the values that they are willing to uphold, the things that they think, the things that culturally are acceptable in the workplace. But just because your organization accepts certain things or believes in certain things does not mean that you have to sacrifice your own beliefs. And that is something that's personal to you. If you're able to separate yourself from your organization's identity, great. You probably won't have an issue with this. But if you find it difficult to separate your identity from the identity of who you are in the workplace and the values that your workplace stands for, then it may be a little bit more challenging for you to set boundaries or for you to uphold values that may be different politically from that of your organization. So, going into this conversation and considering how things are going at your current workplace, I just think it's really important that you know above all else what are your boundaries, what are your values, and what are you not willing to sacrifice, because that is going to be very critical for you to know going into the next several months, possibly even the next like year, 6 months. We've got a road ahead of us. Okay, so my first tip for dealing with political burnout or avoiding workplace burnout due to politics in the workplace is to direct the conversation back to work. If you happen to be in the lunchroom or on a call and someone is bringing up political conversations, number one, if it is against your company policy, don't be afraid to be that guy and say, hey, this is off limits. I think it's best that we change the subject. If you're in a place where politics are acceptable, then you just need to know what you want to be in proximity with. If it's something that you can remove yourself from the conversation, great. But if you're finding that you are getting a little bit uncomfortable, you feel like maybe things are getting a little bit disrespectful or crossing lines, I would say directing the conversation back to work is going to be key. I think most of the time we can kind of ignore the general like news update or did you guys watch the debate last night? Those kind of conversations are very neutral. But once you get into more of the personal opinions or maybe things that were actually said during the debate that can cause some controversy, that might be a time where you politely and respectfully say to the person who's bringing it up, I think that comment is a little bit inappropriate for the workplace. Let's keep our conversations professional and get back to the subject at hand. That is going to be a very clear boundary that is drawn. I don't want to talk about this anymore. It's not appropriate for this call. We have other things to do. Let's focus on those things. Is the person going to be a little bit butthurt or like, what a lame-o? Maybe. Like, they might talk some shit about you. They may have, some eye rolls to give you. But honestly, I'll take the eye rolls. You can say whatever you want behind my back. I don't really care. As long as I'm able to do my job and I'm able to protect my peace in the workplace without getting offended or feeling frustrated by the conversations that are being had that have nothing to do with what we are working on right now, I don't really care what you say about me. And that's something that I've had to work on, right? I didn't used to feel that way. I used to be very much a people pleaser of like, oh, if I have to sacrifice how I feel in order to not make this person feel uncomfortable, then that's what I have to do. But that's the straight road to burnout. That people-pleasing behavior, that self-sacrificial behavior is straight to burnout. So again, in the political climate that we are in, if there are people who are talking about things that are not work related, that make you feel uncomfortable or just inappropriate for the workplace in general, cut it off. And if they have something to say about it, tell them to take it to HR and see what HR wants to do about it. I don't know. So just as a recap, the very first thing that I would do to avoid burnout during this political season is to direct conversations back to work. And if that feels like too much of a stretch, if you're like, Tony, that sounds good. I wish I could say those things to my colleagues. Maybe the first step for you is building your confidence in communicating your values or in communicating your boundaries, in just communicating company policy. If company policy is not to talk about this stuff and somebody keeps bringing it up, you should feel comfortable enough to bring up company policy because you should be backed by the company. That person is doing something against policy. So you should feel confident enough to bring those things up. Now, I know that there are nuances in that. I'm not going to get into all of the factors that could come up when it comes to addressing someone in the workplace and telling them, hey, you're breaking the rules. I know that's not as easy as it sounds, but I would say if you aren't comfortable addressing those things, being straightforward with people, directing the conversation back to work, the first thing is for you to practice, maybe in the mirror before you go to work. At the end of the day, practice what you would say. If someone were to bring something up to you, or if someone has brought something up to you, what would you say to them if you weren't afraid? And do it in the mirror where no one's around, it's just you, and you can say how you feel. You can get it off your chest and then kind of practice like, how do I want to handle this in the future? How would I say to them, let's get back to work. This doesn't matter. We don't need to talk about this right now. How would you say those things? So that might be a step one for you if directing the conversation back to work feels like a little bit scary. Start working on building your confidence on having those conversations with other people. And then one more thing I want to say on that is if you aren't comfortable saying those things to someone in front of the group, maybe it's like on a Teams call or on a Zoom call, and you're like, I don't feel comfortable calling this person out in front of everybody. Maybe wait until after the call if that doesn't feel comfortable and call that person directly or sit down with that person one-on-one and just say, hey, I appreciate that you had things to get off your chest. I totally understand what you're going through right now. I'm feeling very heated politically as well, or I have a lot of opinions as well. But I think it's important that we keep our meetings strictly to the task at hand because we never know what people are going through, what people's beliefs are, and we just want to keep the workplace as professional as possible. Now, I know that sounds a little managery, so let's say that this is your manager who's saying it. I would sit down with my manager and say, hey, during that call, I feel like we got a little bit off topic talking about politics. This project is really important to the success of this company, and I really don't want other people getting distracted by political conversations or anything else. If we can just keep it focused on the project from now on, that would help me in my role so much. I think a manager would receive that quite okay. If they don't, again, that's their problem. Like they can take it up with somebody if they feel a type of way about that. But again, like you are trying to direct it back to the work at hand. Your organization is going to be more supportive of you trying to stay on task than they are going to be supportive of somebody talking about politics that they shouldn't be talking about in the workplace. Okay, moving on. The second important thing that you need in order to overcome or prevent burnout during this political climate is to know your boundaries and practice holding them. In the workplace, it can be very easy to cling on to certain people or to look at certain people as your work bestie or your work wife or your work hubby or whatever and get really close to them. But during this time, it is so important for you to understand the difference between your personal and your professional relationships. It is appropriate to have a conversation about politics with someone that you have a personal relationship with. It is not super appropriate to have a political conversation about your views, your thoughts on the debate, whatever it is, with someone that you have a professional relationship with. If it's after work, great. During work, that is not going to go well. During this time, politics are causing higher stress levels, divisiveness. There's so much damage that can be done when you introduce politics into a conversation at work. And when you work for an organization and you work on a team or you work side by side with a colleague, you cannot allow politics to prevent you from getting your job done. It's just way too messy. I remember when I was working for a previous organization, there was a really intense political situation going on. And I found out that one of my best friends at work felt completely different from me. And I was devastated. And it actually really changed our work relationship going forward. And I mean, we were thick as thieves. Like, we would talk outside of work. We would go on smoke breaks together back when I smoked. Like, it was like a true friendship. And I didn't have that differentiator at that time. So, when I found out that she felt differently than me politically, I felt like this wall had been put up between us. And the way that we were able to work together after that point was nowhere near what it was before. But had we always maintained a professional relationship rather than becoming like besties in the workplace, I don't think that that situation would have been as jolting to me. I would have felt kind of detached or neutral about how she felt politically. But the other thing that I think was important to know was there's a difference between someone sharing their views and crossing a boundary. So if you happen to find yourself in a conversation at work where people are allowed to share their views, or you just happen to be in a conversation where these things are coming up, maybe you're at a work dinner or an after hours event and it just kind of comes up, that is a situation where you may need to like zoom out, take a bird's eye view of the situation. And if you were observing, instead of getting upset or triggered by someone else's opposing views, and then taking that with you into work and feeling, like, oh, I don't want to work with this person anymore. Oh, I'm so uncomfortable. Or, oh, I feel like I have to sacrifice who I am in the workplace. More so look at it as, are we just having a conversation and having opposing views? Or am I having my boundaries crossed right now? For example, Political views are not an excuse to be abusive, racist, homophobic, sexist, ageist, whatever, harassing in any way. Someone's political views should not excuse any of those behaviors. So you need to be very clear on what are my boundaries and what does it look like when someone crosses them. If you are in an environment where people are going to be discussing their political views, you need to be able to detach yourself a little bit from the conversation of just the politics instead of making it a personal attack. Just look at what is actually being said, because if you take anything that is against your political views as a personal attack, you are going to feel frustrated and angry all the time. And I'm not going to say it's easy to detach yourself from that, because a lot of political conversations are deeply personal. But I just want to point out that in the workplace, if there are conversations going on, or if there is a work event and there's conversations going on, know the difference between someone just sharing their views versus actually crossing a boundary for you, because you can handle those situations very differently. If someone is crossing a line or you feel like they're being disrespectful, I would highly recommend nipping it in the butt right there, saying something like, I appreciate your perspective. However, I would like to maintain respect in our conversations. And then if you're ready to change the subject, say, let's talk about something else, or let's talk about this project that we have going on. Change the subject so that they understand, I don't want to talk about this anymore, but also that you're not sacrificing your boundaries. Sometimes just changing the subject can feel like I needed to address something there. I needed to let them know that I felt disrespected. I need to let them know that what they said was not okay in this situation. And whether you decide to address that or not is based on your boundaries and values. So make sure you're clear on those and what it looks like when those get crossed. The third thing that I want you to do when you're dealing with political burnout or workplace burnout due to the political climate is to know what you want your job to be. And I don't mean your job at your place of work. I mean, what do you want your job to be when these conversations arise? If you are in a meeting and people start talking about politics, if you are at an after hours event and people start talking about politics, if you are in a one-on-one and someone says something political, how are you going to handle it? And that is going to be based on what you want your job to be. And your job is defined by your values. So, is it important for you to give your opinion? Number one, in the workplace, do you want your opinion to be clear? Do you feel like it's your job to share your opinion? If so, that might be something that you take a role on when those conversations come up. Or do you want to be the person that redirects? Are you the person who wants to diffuse the conversation and change the subject to something else? If so, then what are the ways that you can easily diffuse? What are the subjects that you can change to? What are the ways that you can move those conversations forward in a different direction? Or do you want to be the person that tries to convince everyone around you of what your political views are? All of these are different jobs. Sharing your opinion, redirecting the conversation, trying to change others' opinions, these are all different jobs, and they're based on your personal values. If you feel super strongly about your political opinions and it burns you out to say nothing or to have all of these conversations redirected and to not address anything and to allow these people to continue to say things or do things that you don't agree with, then maybe it's important for you to share your opinion, or maybe it's important for you to try and get other people to see your side. But on the flip side of that, if it burns you out more to continue to share your opinion that's going to fall on deaf ears, or to continue to try and argue with people who are never going to see your point of view, then maybe it's better to just take the step back and be the person who redirects the conversation, because you know that is going to protect your peace more. So know what you want your job to be in the workplace and just stick to that. Because if you know, look, I'm the peacekeeper. I'm just going to redirect every single time. I'm not going to allow myself to get sucked into these conversations. You will feel so much lighter and better than if you allow yourself to go into a rabbit hole and then get frustrated and feel like you were attacked personally or like you were disrespected. Or it could even be that these politics come in between your professional relationships, and then that changes the way you guys work together for a long period of time until you guys are able to work through that. So just ask yourself, what is the most important outcome for me in the workplace, especially when it comes to having these kinds of conversations? And then what is the best way to achieve that outcome through the easiest path possible? There is a spiritual teacher called Abraham Hicks, and they talk about the path of least resistance or downstream thoughts, which basically just means what is the path that is going to feel the flowiest? What can I do to go with the flow of this stream instead of fighting against every single person who brings this up or who gets in my way or who disagrees with me? Like, what is going to be my path of least resistance? And that is going to significantly help your burnout. And again, I just want to say that if you are the type of person who feels so strongly that not talking about it is going to be your burnout trigger, then be in a place where you're able to talk about those things. Be in a place where those constructive conversations can happen, because maybe part of your burnout is that you're not in the right role or you're not in the right environment. If other people are kind of silencing your beliefs, or you feel frustrated that you can't talk about that at work, or you feel like all you can think about is this and all you want to do is fight for the beliefs of the people that you support and fight for your own beliefs, then maybe that's like a sign that you should switch careers or be in a political field. I think it's just very important to recognize that everybody is different. Everyone has different passions, everyone has different triggers. And in order for you to remain balanced and to prevent your own burnout, you need to do what serves your soul the most. You need to do what feels the best for yourself, because that's really all burnout is. It's just a disconnection from who we are and who we're meant to be. So anytime that these political conversations come up in the workplace, pay attention to how it makes you feel. Some people get really excited about these conversations and they don't take them to heart and they don't feel angry. They feel ignited and excited to have them. And even if it's someone who doesn't agree with them, they enjoy those conversations. Then there's other people who feel like anytime I have a political conversation, I feel like I'm gonna die and I just want to crawl into a hole afterwards. So pay attention to how these things make you feel and lean into the things that feel the best. And then the last thing, and this is probably the most important one, is to have an outlet for after you leave a conversation, after you leave work, after you leave the event, that allows you to release. That could be going for a run. That is the best one that I could possibly recommend if that's available to you. Going for a run is a really good way to shake off the stress of an intense conversation, an icky conversation. So going for a run is the best one if that's possible for you. But listening to music, doing breath work, doing some EFT, all of these are going to be very, very helpful as well. I also taught this really cool little exercise in my keynote a few weeks ago. And it's basically you think about the thing that is upsetting you, stressing you out, making you angry, and you picture it in your mind while you close your eyes. Then you squeeze every single muscle in your body. You just squeeze, 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 and imagine yourself as you're squeezing, beating the crap out of that stressor. Like you punch it, you kick it, you stomp on it, you just smash it to pieces until you can see that stressor disappearing in your mind, of course. And then you would relax. You would let go of the tension. You would take a deep breath and let it go. The reason that's so impactful is because you allow your muscles to feel the tenseness of that stressor. And then when you relax it, it sends this signal to your brain that says it's gone, like the stressor has left the body. So that's a really powerful practice to have as an outlet during these stressful times. And if you have another option, maybe it's just a hobby that you have, it doesn't really matter what it is, it just has to invoke that release. You don't want to hold on to the stressors that are coming at you because of the political climate. There are going to be a lot of things that you probably hear, experience that don't align with how you feel, with how you believe. It could be at work, it could be outside of work. Either way, the more you hold on to those things, the more you are going to feel burnout because it's holding on to these things that don't agree with the truth of who you are. And if you don't allow yourself to just let those things go, they will build up in your body, and that is what will cause your burnout. So making sure that you have that outlet is going to be extremely, extremely important. Do not miss that step. So just a few closing thoughts after all of that information I have just thrown your way. It's just important to remember that the people that you work with, the people you work for, are not who you are in romantic relationships with. They aren't people that you've chosen to have friendships with. They are just professional colleagues, or they are just your boss. They don't dictate how you feel. They don't dictate how you believe. They don't dictate your values. They cannot take those things away from you. So it's so important for you to keep this in mind because it can be really easy to start to identify yourself as one in your organization, like one with the organization, but you are an individual still that just works for the organization. It's a transaction. It's you do work and they pay you for that. You don't have to believe what they believe. You don't have to align with their values. Honestly, it's a lot easier when you do, for the most part, believe what they believe or align with their values, but you don't have to in order to work for that place. Your one and only job on this earth is to continue to hold your own boundaries, to continue to uphold your values, and to be the best version of you that you can possibly be. If you cannot be that in an organization, that's probably not the right organization for you. But if you can be you and have an organization that feels differently than you, then don't allow that to infiltrate how you feel mentally and emotionally. Separate yourself from the beliefs and the values of the organization. Continue to uphold yours and do what you feel is right for you. You might be close to your colleagues, you may care for them very deeply, but at the end of the day, your relationships with people in any capacity, whether it's personal or professional, should never be the reason why you are suffering mentally. So if those relationships or the beliefs of your organization, the beliefs of your colleagues, the actions of your colleagues, of your organization are causing you mental turmoil, then it may be time to seek somewhere else. And I would recommend going through steps 1 through 4 first, redirecting the conversation, holding your boundaries and communicating them, practicing holding them, knowing what you want your job to be, and then having a release. But if you have tried those things and it still feels like this place is just causing me to emotionally, mentally, and even maybe physically feel so drained, then it may just be exposing that it's time for something new, and that's okay. Politics are hard enough to navigate without it infiltrating our workspaces and making it miserable for us to do our jobs. The focus while you are at work is the work itself. If politics are getting out of hand at your workplace, or they're getting the best of you or the other people that you work with, keep these pieces of advice handy to stay grounded and balanced without getting too upset at work. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions or want me to dive deeper into how I would manage burnout or politics in the workplace, please let me know. I have a link below on how you can schedule a free complimentary one-on-one session with me if you are struggling with burnout, whether it's related to the political climate or not. I would be absolutely thrilled to help you through next steps in your burnout bounce back roadmap. So With all of that being said, I hope you have an amazing week ahead. Don't let those politics get the best of you. And until next time, take care.